Hi, thanks for checking out the Catalyst Church sermons. We hope you enjoy this message and pray that God speaks to you through the words that are preached. Have a great day.
Well, good morning and welcome to Good Friday. I guess I just want to talk about the elephant that is in the virtual room. I understand at the moment that we have a lot on our minds with the coronavirus, and you know what, that is understandable. We're concerned for our health. This virus is an absolutely terrible thing, and it's taking lives all around the world at the moment. We're worried about our family's future. We're worried about putting bread on the table, and probably like me, you're a little bit worried about future debt levels for our nation. What if I said today I wanted to share something on this Good Friday that was actually the root cause of all of our problems, even beyond pandemics? And it's what Good Friday is actually all about. And that word is a 3-letter word called sin. Oftentimes when we talk about sin these days, it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek. I don't know if you've noticed that. It's like, I'm a little bit of a sinner, and everybody has a bit of a giggle about that thing. Or often I find that sin is associated with chocolate. I don't know if you've noticed that you're a sinner if you enjoy that triple choc caramel, double choc magnum ice cream or whatever it might be. You know, we all like a little bit of sin in our life, you know, wink, wink. And again, it's sort of associated with a bit of, it doesn't really matter so much. But what I want to say today is that sin both in our life and sin that is in the world is actually insidious. I actually think it's something that is totally underestimated by our world. I'm a real movie lover. Probably one of the things that I'm missing most of all at the moment is just being able to go to the movies. That and watching the footy on a Friday night. But one of the things that most frustrates me about going to the movies is something that I think you'll all agree with. I reckon everybody listening, watching at home will understand this. It's when we underestimate the power of the bad guy. Have you ever noticed that? This is how it works. You know, he's been all powerful sort of all movie, and he's been taking on the good guy or the good guys. And somewhere right in the last scene when the thing is coming to a crescendo, the bad guy gets killed, but it's often just one shot and he's sort of lying on the ground. What does the good guy do? Always the good guy turns his back on the bad guy, right? And what do we all do that are watching? We're like, don't turn your back on him. For the love of God, turn around. And sure enough, the bad guy sort of wakes up out of whatever pain and hurt that he's in, and he steps up and somebody saves the day. I was just watching a Viking movie the other day, the latest one on Netflix. Exactly the same thing happened. This time the bad guy fell into a Scottish peat and he came out of that thing. He was swallowed up. I said, sure enough, don't you turn your back on that guy. And up he came out of the mush and the quicksand, and the heroine, I think, of the movie in this case rescues the day. You know that the Bible talks about this in a similar way when it's talking about sin. It says, don't underestimate sin. In Genesis 4:7, in that famous story of Cain and Abel, God is talking to Cain. He's contemplating actually murdering his brother. And what does God say to Cain? He says, Cain, sin is crouching at your door. In other words, Cain, sin is coming. Cain, sin wants to get you. And let me tell you something about sin, Cain. It crouches down. It hides itself. It looks like it's not a threat, Cain. But let me tell you something, Cain. That sin is a massive threat. It is like that animal that wants to look like it's small and unthreatening and hidden. But Cain, I want to tell you something. That sin, like that animal, it wants to devour you. Cain, it wants to wreck your life. Cain, it wants you to murder your brother. And we know, of course, in that famous story, Cain is one of the first in a long line of billions of people that have underestimated sin and gone on to let that sin devour them, take over their life. So this morning on Good Friday, which is really all about sin, I want to talk about this ugly thing of sin. You know, it does many things in our lives, but there's three things that I want to talk about today. And again, it's what Good Friday is all about. Here's the first thing. Sin is like that animal. It's crouching down, and sin wants to actually devour us personally. This is what sin does. Sin devours us. Sin comes and it grabs a hold of us. And it begins doing this. It causes a self-deception on our life. It blinds us. See, we can't see what it does, but in the first case of sin that was even on the earth, we know that Eve blamed the serpent. Adam blamed Eve. Nobody owns their sin. And see, this is what sin does. Sin causes us to be blinded to actually what is even going on. If I was bold enough right now, I'd smear this paint probably over my eyes, over my head, over my mind. See, what we do is we can't see the true nature of things. We cover up. Why? Because we're naked and we're ashamed, just like Adam and Eve. And then that state of being blind and self-deceived, it causes us to run after all sorts of false things in our lives, the idols in our lives, things that will never get us to God, but try and give us some sort of false worth. It's an interesting word in Scripture. It's the word lust. Oftentimes when we think about lust, we think, lust is bad. Lust is associated with sin. It's an interesting word that I want to talk about this morning. Lust in itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, but what it's talking about is when you over-desire often something that is a good thing. It was a good thing, but we want it too much. We put our heart and our soul into that good thing. Here's an example. Sex is a good thing, but sex is the main thing in our life as an over-desire. Sex outside of the bounds that God has told us to live, that's lust. Comfort's a good thing. It's okay, but when we seek comfort at the exclusion of everything else, that's when gluttony and laziness becomes our God. One more, success. Everybody wants to be successful, but success is that when it's that main thing in our life, then we find that we're self-deceived. We find that we're running after success as the thing that will give us the answers in life. We overwork. We are driven to unhealthy levels of work and study. We ignore the kids. We exhaust ourselves. And I'll tell you something, for those of you out there with success as your God at the moment, you're finding it particularly hard in a season when you cannot be productive. Maybe this time is the time for you to examine your own life. This list goes on, and the thing is, these things mean that we are in slavery. We are a slave to these things. But here's the real kicker. When we're self-deceived, we don't even know it. We don't even realize that we're in slavery because we can't see it. We're deceived. What else do we find out that sin does? Sin devours our relationships. See, sin is not gentle. It takes a hold of the relationships that we have with other people, and it stains us. I'm going to go back to Cain and Abel again. What do we see there? We see Cain murdering Abel. Why did Cain do that? I'll tell you why. Because Abel got in the way of one of the idols in Cain's life. Cain wanted the glory from God, but he didn't want to trust God. He wanted his life to be based on his security, on the things that he could do for himself. And his brother Abel got in the way. He showed him a better way. He showed him up. And sin was crouching at his door and it mastered him. Let's be honest, we do the same things all the time. That person who got in the way of your promotion, that boss that treats you unfairly, holds you back, what do you want? You want blood. That person who didn't invite you to that party or that wedding or that family reunion, how dare they? And revenge is on your lips because they've got in the way of the idol of acceptance in your life. The thing that brings significance to our lives. Why do we shed blood? Because people get in the way of the idols in our life. Money, ego, status, comfort. If you get in the way of that, man, get out of my way. I am ready to shed blood. I am ready to hurt you. You know what? Sadly, sometimes that's physically, but it's not always. Literal blood. How else do we hurt each other? We lash out. We write on social media. Sometimes we withdraw from each other. We sulk. Sometimes we insult. See, sin devours our relationships. And here's the last thing sin does. Sin devours our relationship with God himself. Romans 1:9 basically tells us that we've lost our fear of God and it stains our life. It's interesting when the serpent is looking to deceive Eve, what does he say to her? He says, do you not realize that this will make you like God? In other words, you will be the same level as God. You won't need to fear God in your life anymore. Sin in its essence says you are the most important thing in the world. The world revolves around you. It causes you to be self-centered, not God-centered, the way we're actually designed. Martin Luther, a famous monk that lived all those years ago, he said, human nature is so deeply curved in on itself that it wickedly, curvedly, and viciously seeks to use all things, even God, for its own sake. You know what he's getting at? He's saying we are so self-centered even in the way we deal with God. We go to God to get blessings, the things that we want from him. And when he doesn't do things the way we expect, the way we want, we blame God. We get angry at God. We despise God. And this is what we look like right here. Do you see what sin does to us? Do you see how we underestimate it? Do you see how insidious it is? We were once clean, but now we're stained and we're dirty and we're miserable, we're deceived, we're broken, and we're separated from God. Look at us, twisted and broken before God, an absolute mess. You know what the Bible says? The Bible says our efforts to get back to him are like filthy rags. And look at me this morning and it makes a bit more sense. Where do we get to from here? How do we find our way back to God? Well, thank goodness for Good Friday. Thank God that Jesus died on the cross. And maybe you're listening this morning, you're starting to get a glimpse of the seriousness of sin, how we've underestimated sin. And I want to have a look now at what the blood of Christ does for us. Here's the first thing. Jesus' blood, it redeems us. You know, the consequences of our self-deception and slavery to life takes all sorts of turns and twists. But a big thing it does for us is shame. Listen, I have sat with so many people on couches who are slaves to the things in their life that have followed sin down their path. Slaves to lust, slaves to addiction, slaves to alcohol, slaves to success. And I've seen what it brings. It brings shame. It brings the breakdown of families. It destroys people. And you know what? It's not just the big sins. Everybody has their own personal story of slavery, the things that you can't even talk to the close friends that you have about, the things that won't let you break free. Listen to me. Jesus is our Redeemer. This is what the cross is all about. Being redeemed means we are liberated, freed, rescued from slavery to a person or a thing. 1 Peter 1:18 says, for you know that it was not with perishable things such as silver or gold that you were redeemed from the empty way of the life that was handed down from your ancestors, but with the precious blood of Christ, a lamb without blemish or defect. Now, kids at home, I want to be real clear about this. This is not real blood, but I want us to get a picture now about what the blood does, why the blood is necessary. See, the thing about being a slave is it means we're helpless to save ourselves, but Jesus comes along and it's He that redeems us. Listen to me. Those nails that were hammered into His hands, that smash through His feet, that spear through His side, that agony on the cross, that blood that was shed, it was so we could be free. We are redeemed. We are freed. Free from the self-deception of shame, slavery, of the life that we were living, and redeemed into this newness of life. What else does Jesus' blood do to us? What about our relationships? You know, many people are watching today, and I know that you are dealing with the brokenness of the effects of sin that have been poured out on you. Maybe you're the unfairly treated party, the Abel in the relationship. Maybe you have been hated, despised, murdered with words. Maybe you've been betrayed or abandoned. And if that's you this morning, I genuinely feel for you. My heart goes out to you. But here's the truth. If we're really honest, we've all been Cains in some way or another. Who today couldn't say that you've never despised somebody else, that you've never been furious at somebody, that you've never let the idol in your heart rise up and cause you to lash out at somebody else? The prize that you wanted got in the way. Somebody got in the way of that prize. I want us to know this, that the mistreatment and the way we hurt each other, listen to me, it is not unseen by God. It is not for a minute like God is uninterested in the way we murder each other, both physically but certainly with words, the way we betray each other, the way we ignore each other. God is furious. God is angry at the sin that is in this world. And maybe you've said to yourself, as somebody has hurt you, I want blood. See, blood is actually the issue. Did you know something? You know that blood is spoken about 3 times more in the New Testament than even the cross of Christ? The reason for that is blood shed represents something. First of all, it represents suffering and pain and death. And let me tell you this, God is sickened by these things. We need to know that God is angry with these things. And one thing that is also true about blood is that there is a blood that represents justice. Blood for blood. The principle of sacrifice is found all throughout the scripture. Good Friday is all about that. Good Friday, the Day of Atonement, is about that reconciliation to God, where God pours out His wrath on Jesus when He sheds His blood for our sin. Listen, Jesus was a bloody mess on Good Friday. Maybe He became bloody right at the beginning when that angry mob surrounded Him and beat Him with blood. Blood would have come from His mouth and His nose. It would have continued as that whip with strands of leather and bone and metal on the end of it dug into His back and ripped into the thighs of Jesus. Did you know Jesus' beard was pulled from His face? He was a horrifying, bloody mess, the scripture tells us. A crown of thorns was pushed into His face and blood poured out of His head. Nails through His hands and His feet. And hanging there, Jesus continued to bleed until He died. Hebrews 12:24 says, to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. Do you see what that passage of scripture is saying? It's saying Abel's blood, that first bloodshed, it sickened God, but there is a better way. Jesus' blood speaks a better word. It covers our sin. It causes us to be reconciled with God. It ultimately causes us to have the chance, if we'll take it, to be reconciled to each other. See, that bloodshed cleanses the sin against us and the sins done by us. God sees and he acts. And ultimately that leads to forgiveness and reconciliation. And the final thing this morning is God's blood. The blood of Jesus ransoms us. God hates sin. You know that? He wants justice. Here's the truth. You know what? We all want justice. If somebody robbed us, hurt us, assaulted us, we would want justice. Can you imagine if your child or your mother were hurt or beat up and we identified the person and we took them to the courts and the evidence was clear, but the judge just dismissed the charges? You know what? Because you are made in God's image, something in you would rise up and you would want justice. And why do we think that God is any different to that? As we sin against him, God is the person that we've sinned against our whole life. If God, as he looks at us, declared us anything but guilty, he would cease to be a good and a just God. And the truth for us is there is no hiding. The Bible in Romans tells us that God is a good king and he's a good judge. Romans 2:16 says that there will be a day when God judges the secrets of men by Christ Jesus. What that says is one day you will stand before God. Those wicked thoughts, those words, those deeds will be listed. And unlike an imperfect judge, God is perfect. He will judge us accordingly. But you know the wonderful news, God isn't just holy and righteous and just, he's also compassionate and willing to forgive, incredibly patient, and thank God for that. So what is the answer? Once again, it's the blood of Jesus on the cross. And the greatest love act ever known to mankind. Jesus pays the price for justice. Maybe the simplest scripture on what happens here is 2 Corinthians 5:21. It says, God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. Now, just everybody relax at home. Things aren't going to get weird here, but I want to make a point. Martin Luther calls this the great exchange. And it's what we see happening here today. Jesus sees our sin. He covers it with his blood. And with it, what he does is he gives us his perfect record. Look, Jesus took on himself the lies, the hate, the affairs, the lust, the anger, the cheating, the gluttony, the very worst of who we were supposed to be. And Jesus swaps it with his perfect record. Jesus gives us this clean record. He gives us this clean shirt, if you want to call it that. And he takes this on himself with all of the brokenness that it represents. So we are broken in ourselves. We are broken in our relationships. We're broken in our relationships with God. We deserve death, but we get life. He chooses death in our place, the second person of the Trinity. Jesus takes death in our place so that we could live. And the key to all of this is grace. Listen to me on this. There is nothing we can do. That is why Jesus died on the cross and he said, it is finished. And this is what I want us to hear today. If we hear nothing else, it is done. He did what you cannot do. Are you ashamed because of the way life has turned on itself with you, with your addictions? Listen to me. It is finished. Are you saddened by the broken relationships? It is finished. Are you separated from God eternally? It can be finished. All of this is a free gift. I want to ask the question though, why would we go and try and put this shirt back on? Why do we try and prove ourselves? Why do we look at our performance to justify ourselves before God? Why do we live in shame and discouragement? Why do we lack the forgiveness that we're meant to give to other people? Why can't we be reconciled to others? See, every time we do this, it's like we are trying to take the finished work of Christ and put it back on. Say to Jesus that you were not enough. What you did on the cross was not enough for me. When all that Jesus asked for us, all that God the Father asked for us, is that we would have faith in him, that we would believe, that we would say, you were enough. Jesus, you are the only way. And we run around and we try and clean ourselves up. We try and cover it up. We try and be real good. We clean this up. And when we do that, we're saying, Jesus, you're not enough. I need to add to what you've done. My works are better than your works. Listen to me. Don't put this shirt back on. You've got one shirt. Wear it. By faith, put it on. You are cleansed and cleaned by Christ. Some of you today just listening, maybe you've been distant from Christ. You've been trying to wear that shirt again, and you need to hear this again with fresh ears. You need to understand that it's all about the cross of Christ. And I want to revisit that in a minute, but I just felt this morning in this moment that I want to make this point, and it's relevant to these times of viruses and pandemics and isolation. Listen to me, everybody that's listening. If Jesus cares for you this much, to lay his life down for you, to bleed and to die on a cross, don't you think that you can trust him for the anxieties and the cares that you have at the moment? If the darling of heaven, a second person of the Trinity, the Word made flesh, would go through this pain and this suffering, wouldn't he right now, be interested in the cares and the worries that you're carrying? 1 Peter 5:7 says, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Listen to me. Jesus had the insults cast on him. He had the whip violently cast against his body, a crown of thorns cast into his head. Then he had the sin of the world cast upon him and the wrath of God and his fury cast upon him. Don't you think that he can right now take your concerns? Can't you trust him for the things that are going on in your life, the concerns over health of loved ones, finances, the concerns over how you'll get through these next few months? Listen to me. Cast your cares on him. For some listening this morning, that means starting right now at the beginning and casting your sin on him. Listen, he's already taken it. You know what cast means? It means to hand it over to him. Jesus has already taken that. It's simply faith. For others, you need to remind yourself of the cross this morning and hand over responsibility of your effort and your works to Jesus. He's taken it. And for others, you simply need to remind yourself that he can take your cares, that you can cast them on him this morning. This is Jesus. This is the one that loves you enough to die for you. Would you cast your life on him this morning? Do you see that the cross of Jesus means so much? Do you understand now again, maybe afresh, maybe for the first time, what it means to you, to us?